Every ancient battle tactic explained. The shield wall and heavy infantry line. A shield wall is a close-packed infantry formation where soldiers overlap shields to create a continuous barrier. It turns many individuals into one defensive surface that can absorb pushing, weapon strikes, and short bursts of panic. The front rank sets the line. The second and third ranks add body weight, keep the line from bowing backward, and replace exhausted or wounded fighters. In practice, commanders use the shield wall as a stable platform for controlled violence. The shield wall works best on firm ground with clear frontage and enough depth to rotate fighters. It also works when the unit has drilled together, because the formation depends on small habits, such as keeping shield overlap consistent while stepping forward. It fails when cohesion breaks. Rough terrain pulls files apart. Missile fire punishes density, especially when it comes from height and drops behind shields. A hard impact on the flank or a sudden gap from casualties can create a seam that grows as men react independently. Armies tried to fix these failure modes with reserves, by rotating the front ranks and by anchoring flanks on terrain or friendly units. The phalanx and dense spear formations. A phalanx is a deep block of heavy infantry organized around long spears and tight alignment. A long spear extends reach, so the front ranks can strike before an enemy sword can reach them. Depth matters because several ranks project points forward and add forward pressure, which is the slow shove that turns contact into collapse. The formation functions through synchronized movement. Each file keeps spacing, keeps shields aligned, and advances as a unit, so the spear line remains continuous rather than turning into isolated duels. The phalanx works when terrain is open and predictable, and when commanders can keep the block oriented toward the main threat. It becomes dangerous to face head-on, because closing distance means walking into multiple layers of spear points. It fails when the block loses alignment. Uneven ground creates gaps. Sharp turns expose the side, where long spears become awkward and shield coverage is weaker. Dense formations also suffer under sustained missile fire. Armies adjusted by screening with light troops, by splitting into multiple blocks rather than one giant mass, and by assigning cavalry or lighter infantry to protect the flanks. Flexible infantry systems. Flexible infantry systems break heavy infantry into smaller units arranged in staggered lines rather than one continuous wall. In a staggered line, planned gaps act as movement lanes. Units can advance through them, withdraw through them, and reinforce without causing a full traffic jam. This structure supports staged fighting. A first line engages and tests the enemy. If it stalls, it can pull back in an organized way while a second line moves forward, which keeps pressure steady while reducing exhaustion in the decisive space. This system works when discipline is high and officers can coordinate movement under stress. The mechanism depends on trust. Soldiers must believe that stepping back is part of the plan rather than a sign of defeat. It fails when withdrawals become disorderly, because gaps that were safe lanes become entry points for enemy penetration. It also fails when units drift laterally and lose alignment with neighboring units, creating exposed seams. Roman manipular and later cohort-based structures represent different answers to the same problem. Smaller units offer finer control but demand more coordination. Larger units simplify command but increase the cost of local failure. These systems connect to the larger military structure because they require training, standardized signals, and a command culture that can manage rotation and reinforcement as deliberate processes. Flank attack and envelopment. Envelopment attacks the side of an enemy formation, where shields face forward and cohesion is weakest. A flank attack aims to break a portion of the line and then roll along it. A double envelopment attempts to close from both sides and create a pocket. The center usually holds the enemy in place. The wings apply movement and pressure until the enemy cannot maintain a continuous front. This tactic works when the attacking force has mobility, local superiority on the wings, or terrain that allows a wider arc. It also works when the enemy commits heavily forward and reacts slowly, because turning a large formation under pressure is difficult. It also fails if the enemy withdraws early in good order, because a pocket that never closes becomes a chase that strains supply and coordination. Commanders mitigated risk by refusing a flank, which means pulling one wing back to reduce exposure, or by anchoring on terrain such as rivers, hills, or fortifications. Across eras and regions, the underlying mechanism stays consistent. A formation can endure frontal pressure longer than it can endure pressure from the side, because a flank threat forces rapid reorientation, which is when cohesion usually breaks. Feigned retreat and ambush. A feigned retreat is a controlled withdrawal designed to trigger pursuit. The withdrawing force signals weakness, then pulls the enemy into extended spacing. Pursuers stretch their line, lose support between units, and often run ahead of their own command and supplies. At the chosen moment, the retreating force turns, or a reserve strikes the pursuers from the side. An ambush uses concealment and terrain to attack when the enemy cannot deploy properly, often when a marching column is stretched across a choke point. These tactics work because they exploit predictable human behavior under stress and opportunity. Pursuit encourages risk-taking, looting, and individual initiative, which reduces cohesion. Ambush multiplies that effect by creating sudden confusion, blocking movement, and targeting leaders. They fail when control breaks. A feigned retreat becomes a real rout if troops panic or if signals fail. An ambush collapses if scouts detect it, or if the attackers strike too early and reveal themselves without trapping the target. Armies increased reliability through rehearsed signals, layered ambush positions, and terrain selection that offered both concealment and exits. Steppe horse archers used repeated feigned retreats because they could reset distance and maintain control through mobility. Infantry-based forces used ambush and deception more often in forests, hills, and river crossings. These tactics connect to the larger system because they depend on reconnaissance, local guides, and disciplined command structures that can coordinate sudden transitions. Missile troops and skirmishers. Missile troops include archers, slingers, and javelin throwers who attack at range. A skirmisher is a light infantry fighter who operates in open order and avoids sustained close combat. Their role is to disrupt enemy formations before the heavy lines collide. Concentrated fire forces opponents to raise shields, slows movement, and breaks alignment. Javelins are especially useful at short range because a heavy throw can stick into a shield and make it harder to hold, which exposes the body during the final approach. Sling bullets cause blunt trauma and create stress because impacts can injure through armor and arrive quickly. Archery can sustain pressure over longer periods, especially when resupply is organized. Missiles work best against dense targets and against units constrained by terrain or pinned in place. They fail when light troops lack protection. Cavalry can overrun skirmishers, and heavy infantry can trap them if withdrawal routes are blocked. Commanders address this by screening with their own cavalry, by using terrain to protect flanks, and by timing skirmisher withdrawal before the decisive clash. Different military cultures treated missiles differently. Some used them mainly to prepare the infantry collision, while others built entire battle plans around sustained ranged pressure and mobility. In every case, the connection to the larger system is logistical and tactical. Ammunition supply, training time, and coordination with heavier troops determine whether missile fire stays harassment or becomes a battle-shaping force. Cavalry and mobility. Cavalry provides speed, shock, and the ability to exploit openings. Heavy cavalry aims to break cohesion with a concentrated charge, often using lances or long spears, then finishing with close combat. Light cavalry focuses on scouting, harassment, and pursuit, and it often carries javelins or bows. Horse archers combine mobility with repeated ranged attacks, maintaining distance and striking from changing angles until the enemy either breaks formation to chase or becomes exhausted and disordered. Cavalry works best against flanks, rear areas, and units already disrupted by missiles or fatigue. It fails against a disciplined spear line that faces it squarely, because horses will not willingly run into a forest of points, and riders lose momentum if they hesitate. Cavalry also has constraints that infantry does not. Horses require fodder, water, rest, and careful handling. Campaign fatigue reduces performance long before battle begins. Commanders who relied on cavalry treated it as a resource to preserve for the decisive moment, rather than a constant battering ram. Across regions, equipment and terrain shaped variants. Open plains favor sustained mobility and horse archery patterns. More broken terrain favors shorter strikes, scouting and pursuit. Siege warfare. A siege is a campaign to take a fortified place by isolating it, starving it, or breaching its defenses. Attackers encircle the target to cut supply and prevent relief. Engineers build trenches, ramparts, and fortified lines to protect the besieging army. Assault tools include ladders, rams for gates, and mining, which means tunneling under walls and collapsing supports. Sieges work when the attacker can sustain supply and maintain control of surrounding approaches. They fail when attackers cannot feed themselves, when disease spreads in crowded camps, or when a relief army breaks the encirclement. Defenders counter with sorties, fire, and countermining, which involves digging intercept tunnels to fight underground or collapse enemy galleries. Attackers adapted by building double lines, one facing inward to control the city and one facing outward to defend against relief forces. Different regions develop distinct engineering styles based on available materials and terrain. The common logic remains logistical pressure combined with controlled violence at chosen points. Naval warfare. Naval warfare applies the same principles of cohesion and timing to ships. Ramming uses a reinforced bow to strike the side of an enemy vessel, aiming to breach the hull or disable oars. A successful ram requires speed, angle control, and coordination between rowers and helmsmen. Boarding occurs when ships lock together, either intentionally or by accident, turning combat into close fighting on narrow decks. Missile troops often support boarding by suppressing defenders during the crossing. Naval tactics work best when crews can maneuver as a unit and maintain formation under stress. They fail when ships become entangled, when rowers lose rhythm, or when a fleet loses spacing and cannot protect its flanks. Variants depend on ship design and environment. Some systems emphasize ramming and maneuver, while others rely more on boarding and marine strength. At sea, the battle is short, but preparation is long. Ancient battle tactics manage cohesion, space, timing, and morale under limited communication. The tactics are different answers to the same set of problems.